So I'm sure you already know what's going on before coming into this video, because this chapter basically already shows us as it starts, because we see Gojo in this afterlife ethereal plane with his deceased Jujutsu High friends. And that's because Gojo himself is dead. I know, that's wild and out of the blue, like a huge shocker, because in the previous chapter, it was kind of the opposite, right? He was still alive and he was being declared the winner by the sorcerers who were watching, because he kind of put Sukuna in like a checkmate situation, right? Where Gojo had defeated Maharaga, severely wounded Sukuna, whose healing had slowed down and was also unable to use his domain expansion, as to where, on the other hand, Gojo was still ready to go. But now, coming into this chapter, he's dead and talking to his friends, which is like, I said, wild. And Geto asks Gojo, he's like, so how was Sukuna? And Gojo is like, he was crazy strong and he wasn't giving it all he had. I don't think I would have won even if he didn't have the 10 shadows. And that's like a crazy controversial statement. Like, that's going to anger a lot of people reading that. And I don't know if that's like a grand definitive statement there. This could just be Gojo reaching a state of humility now that he has died. But considering what he also says a little bit later, with Sukuna wasn't able to give me his all though, I think it's pretty much true. Both statements there, because Sukuna definitely didn't give him his all. We didn't see Sukuna use his fire ability, whatever that is, the fire arrow thing that he used against Jogo, whether that's a cursed technique or him manipulating cursed energy the way that Kashimo does and makes his lightning. Still don't know, but he didn't use that against Gojo. And then raised the question of, like, what else wasn't he using? Aside from him not having all 20 fingers and not having his true body. But regardless, Gojo pushed him. It was like high diff for sure for Sukuna to be able to defeat him. And speaking of that, after Gojo finishes speaking with his friends here in the pseudo afterlife airport, we come to Gojo on the ground and he's dead. And it's because he was like cut in half off panel. And it goes back to what I was saying, like, how did this happen? Because he was just standing there facing off against Sukuna. Sukuna was severely damaged, no Maharaga, and now he's just dead. Well, we find out how Sukuna did it at least, but we don't get to see how it played out visually. So we hear Sukuna saying that Maharaga's adaptation can only start after a single attack, and then it slowly starts to analyze, and its completion is only a matter of time. But if it receives another identical attack during that period, it accelerates the adaptation. And even after it's adapted, it continues to adapt further, which is insane. So that confirms what we were wondering, and what the series actually posited itself a few chapters back, like how Maharaga's ability works, his adaptation. Is it time-based, or is it like volume-based? And it's a little bit of both. More so instantaneously, kind of. But going further, Sukuna says that what he wanted from Maharaga was a model of how to tear through infinity, because Maharaga was adapting to infinity by altering the essence of his own cursed energy. And that was something that Sukuna couldn't do. Like, that's how Maharaga was able to, like, strike Gojo and just bypass Limitless in the first place. But Sukuna couldn't do that, so he was waiting for Maharaga to do another thing to adapt to Limitless. And that's when he finally saw him do a slash that could bypass it. So going back to chapter 234, we saw Gojo fighting against Maharaga and Agito at the same time. And Gojo was doing pretty well. And Sukuna started giving Maharaga like this pep talk. And Maharaga's wheel spun, indicating that it adapted yet again. And then after that, he fired off a slash that cut off Gojo's arm. And Sukuna was like very good, because it was like at that moment, that's what Sukuna wanted. This is something that Sukuna can learn, because that was like a slashing attack. It's something similar to what Gojo does with Cleave and Dismantle. And it also goes back to what Sukuna was saying about Maharaga continuing to adapt after it had already adapted, because previously it had already adapted to Limitless, as to where he could just strike Gojo and whatnot. But then we saw his wheel spin yet again. Then he slashed him because it further adapted, which is like so crazy. So what this adaptation actually was is Maharaga altering the essence of his cursed energy as he initially was doing, but this time with the slash, he's cutting, as Sukuna says, existence itself. So it's bypassing Limitless by just cutting everything there. So it doesn't matter if Gojo was standing there coated in Limitless or had like a adamantium barrier protecting him. It doesn't matter. Everything that exists right there is being cut, which is like the strongest thing, you know, in this series for sure. And I think I said this in my spoilers video, but this reminds me of Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. Eventually he becomes so powerful that his sword can like cut through dimensions. And it's possible that Gege was inspired by that maybe, since, you know, he is a big Togashi fan. But I wonder if Mahoraga is using the same principle as Limitless itself, since it was said that Limitless targets cursed energy on a molecular scale. That's how it alters space. So I suppose Mahoraga could be doing the same thing. Instead of like altering and moving space like Limitless, he's just cutting it. Meaning that, you know, it's cutting Limitless itself, since it's not bypassing Mahoraga, since they're using the same fundamental. And then that's what's happening off panel here, with Sukuna killing Gojo and cutting him in half. I guess Gojo kind of walked up to him thinking that Sukuna was defeated, and then Sukuna just fires from the hip like a cleave and just cuts him in half, with Gojo not being none the wiser. Now, how Sukuna did this could have been done one of two ways, I suppose. So first of all, he just watched how Mahoraga did it and he figured it out organically and just did it by manually manipulating cursed energy, because he said he needed to see something that he could do, and the slashing attacks are in his repertoire. And it was also said by Angel that if he sees anything once, he'll be able to do it, such as with, you know, him seeing Gojo healing his own brain, which led Sukuna doing the same thing. So Sukuna can now fire off cleave and dismantles that cut through space essentially, right? Now it's that, or another fun possibility is that Mahoraga being completely destroyed by Gojo's purple led to Mahoraga being absorbed by Sukuna, because, you know, the 10 shadows. We know that when their Shikigamis die, they get passed on, like their life force gets passed on to the other Shikigamis and they become totality. So what would happen when Mahoraga dies? Does he go to another Shikigami, or does he go to the user itself? And then the user gains whatever he adapted. That would be pretty cool, but I guess that's not what's happening here. I guess it's just Sukuna using his Jujutsu geniusry to figure out how to do this on the fly by just watching Mahoraga, which is so cool. Like, he just used Mahoraga as like a Jujutsu problem-solving computer. He was like, all right, I can't quite figure out how to defeat Gojo because of his overpowered curse technique. But if I have this Shikigami computer that can figure it out, I'll just use him to give me the data, and I'll use that data to defeat him myself. And that's essentially what he did. You can call him a fraud, that's fine, but come on, you gotta admit that's pretty cool. And I'm not discrediting Gojo in any way. He did amazing. He had a lot of amazing moments in this fight. He even taught Sukuna a few things himself. But at the end of the day, Gojo kind of had to die. And I'll talk more about this in my video on Sunday, but Gojo doesn't have to be number one. That spot is supposed to be for Sukuna. It was always kind of said that it was, rather than Gojo being the modern strongest. But Gojo did well. You know, his time came, and now it's time for, you know, Yuji to take over at this point. But aside from that, there's still something else that happens, because at the very end of the chapter, Kashimo comes in. And we knew that this was going to happen because Kashimo said a couple chapters back that if Gojo dies or is defeated, he's going against Sukuna next. And Kashimo's whole entire motivation in the series is to fight Sukuna. He comes from like 400 years ago, where Kenjaku found him and made a deal with him. And the whole deal was like, hey, you know, I'll reincarnate you to come back in the Culling game to where you could fight Sukuna. Because Kashimo was like, I don't know, an old guy looking for a good fight, and he couldn't find anybody strong enough, which is exactly the same thing that has afflicted Sukuna. It's even touched on in this chapter by Gojo. He even references it the same way that Yorozu does. The loneliness that comes with unrivaled strength. The one who will teach you about love is... Well, that was more so Yorozu saying that, but it's referenced in the chapter nonetheless. And that's what's kind of linking Kashimo and Sukuna here, because Kenjaku told Kashimo that the strongest sorcerer he ever met was Sukuna. So now he's finally getting the moment to fight Sukuna. And we also found out that Kashimo has a curse technique, but he can only use it once. Like when he was fighting against Hikari, he was just manipulating cursed energy to make it like lightning. And considering that the narration is also saying the god of lightning, Kashimo Hajime here. I think it's confirming that Gege has based Kashimo off of Indra. Indra, who is the king of devas, or the god of lightning, or I guess you could say like the Hindu god of lightning. And he had this weapon called the Vajra. And it's like a super powerful thunderbolt, essentially. And I'm thinking that's what Kashimo's curse technique probably is. It's like just one big, massive thunderbolt, lightning bolt, whatever. And it could kill anyone, essentially. Even Sukuna. Like, maybe even more powerful than purple. And I really wonder if he's going to hit Sukuna with it, because, you know, he can't kill Sukuna here because Megumi needs to survive, in my opinion. Like, he absolutely needs to live. Yes, the story is sad and a lot of characters die, clearly, but I don't think Megumi is going to be one of them. But I do think that Kashimo will have his moment where he wrecks Sukuna, but something happens to where Megumi lives too. And Sukuna ultimately needs to get his true form anyway. So yeah, expect all of that to happen in some way or another in the next couple chapters. But that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one.